everybody. Welcome back to the Babel channel for another episode of Quick Strike. The Lightning are on a losing streak for the first time in about a month as they drop this game 4-3 to the Carolina Hurricanes. My name is Michael Wax, joined as always with my co-host Jake Ricker. Jake, how are you doing tonight?
Michael, let's repeat that phrase you just said. The Lightning are on a losing streak for the first time in about a month. One more time. And a losing streak for the first time in about a month. So this was an unfortunate loss, a frustrating loss for sure. And we'll get into all those reasons and all that good stuff. But I'm going to say this up front. No need to panic right now for Bolts fans. Lightning still remaining at the top of the league right now. Still the number one team in the Atlantic Division. Tough two losses, but Lightning are finally getting 2 days of rest now after this game. Not to worry. This team is so good at responding and getting back on track. No need to worry whatsoever.
Yeah, and when we talk about how the Lightning have lost 2 games in a row, again, this is not something that happens very often. But I think what is so jarring to a lot of people, myself included, and I'd love to hear what you think about it too, and our fans down below, comment down below what you think about this game as well, is that this game really felt like a shift in tone in terms of what type of play style they used. And they were facing someone, they faced Dallas in the first game of the losing streak, and they did not play necessarily well. But Dallas is also not a team that is playing well either this season. Now you go to Carolina, who, in my opinion, is probably the best team besides the Lightning in the Eastern Conference. And they seemed to dominate the Lightning the entire night. Andre Vasilevsky was massive tonight, and the Lightning just felt like they were a step behind.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I think it's because they've been playing so many games recently. They haven't had that 2 day gap. You can really tell it kind of caught up to them. And not to mention, too, Michael, we're still playing without Ryan McDonough right now and Eric Cernak, who are two huge parts of our defense, especially Ryan McDonough. That guy is a crazy shot blocker. He's one of the probably the second best defenseman on this team. Maybe you could argue Mikhail Sergachev is even better, and he's got a lot more upside than McDonough, but that's an argument for another day. So that's obviously a huge factor. Luke Shen and Borgman are just not the same level as those two guys, and we'll get to one of those guys in a minute here. But there's a lot of things that are working against the Lightning right now, and I don't want to make excuses because the Lightning did make a lot of key mistakes that made them lose this game.
Yeah, they had their feet not underneath them tonight. It just really felt like a game where Carolina was dictating play for the most part. And we love to talk about the positives with this team. But again, we are going to start off with some negatives in terms of what we saw tonight. The biggest negative, in my opinion, and Jake, I know it's the biggest negative for you, for this entire fan base. And when you look at individuals of these things, you start to really pick and choose on what were actually penalties and what were not. We're talking about the penalties. It has gotten to a point where it is actually concerning. Like, we can talk about all we want in terms of the Lightning are playing well for the most part. Certain people are playing very well in the offensive zone or the defensive zone. The goalies are playing up to their potential. But this is not a nitpick anymore. This is a genuine concern where the Lightning are putting themselves into a position to fail during the game because they are taking dumb penalties and they're putting their penalty kill at more of a risk, which is already exhausted. Like the penalty kill, what are we, 35 games into the season, has had to kill off more penalties than any other team in the league because Tampa is now the most penalized team in the league. This is a situation that needs to get fixed. Coach Cooper needs to talk to his guys. Pat Maroon said after the game that they are getting killed with penalties. I don't know what it is. This seemed to happen last year too, because we looked up before we started recording. This is a continuation of a problem last year. They need to get disciplined.
Yeah, penalties are a major, major problem for Lightning right now. 6 penalties tonight, which is just unacceptable. And I know a lot of people are frustrated with the referees and saying that there are a lot of missed calls on Tampa Bay. Some of these penalties should not be penalties. And listen, I get that. But at the end of the day, you cannot control what penalties are called for in favor of you and called on the, let's just say, Carolina Hurricanes in this example. But you can control limiting the amount of simple mistakes that you make and getting penalties called on you. For example, I'm going to use Andreas Boardman as an example here. He had the puck in the third period when the game was tied at 3, and he went into the offensive zone, looked like he was ready to take a shot, then decided to try and make an offensive move to get further into the zone. He got destroyed, went down, and the Hurricanes were able to steal the puck away, and then he panics, gets his stick caught up in the skates, and gets called for tripping. You cannot do that. That is a clear trip. They're going to call that against anybody, no matter what. It was right in front of the referee as well. Those are simple mistakes that you can limit. That's not something that's not out of your control. And that's what's so frustrating for me, is that this is something that the Lightning have in control with. And again, too, let's take Coleman, for example, who got called for unsportsmanlike conduct. I know a lot of people were frustrated with that call, but you can't do that. You have to understand that the Hurricanes are trying to get under your skin, and they did it successfully. That's their goal right there. Sure, the guy may have flopped. Sure, this is hockey. You shouldn't call those kinds of calls, but they're calling it, and that's the way this game is going right now. You've got to try and keep your cool, keep a level head, and play your game. The Lightning did not do that tonight, and they got called for penalty after penalty, and they paid for it multiple times, especially in that third period when Carolina ended up taking a 4-3 lead late in the game.
Yeah, and you mentioned Blake Coleman. The unsportsmanlike conduct penalty was probably not even the most frustrated I was with him this evening, because heard the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty being called. We don't know what happened. Like, they didn't show any replays. I didn't hear about anything from any Lightning reporters about what
I
might have
saw I
happened.
saw it. It was He got hit in the face. He got bumped and a little bit of an elbow, which is what it was. So he was pissed, and rightfully so. But you still have to have a cooler head and be prepared for that situation.
Well, that's the thing. I was going to talk about how in the roughing penalty that he got 2 minutes after leaving the box, he decided to go up to Warren Fogle and just punch him. Like, you can't do that.
No, absolutely
And
not.
you need to be smarter, especially when I think, and this is probably a controversial statement in terms of the fact that they have so many good penalty killers. Blake Coleman's their best one. He's so good at killing penalties. So when he's in the box, the Lightning have a tougher time killing penalties. And if he's in the box, they have to be on the penalty kill. So it's just a situation where I just don't understand where this team is going in terms of their discipline. This has been a problem in the Cooper era overall, and especially over the last 2 seasons. Like, I don't know what they can do to fix it. They really need to sit down and have a serious talk, because if I'm correct, I don't think they took a ton of penalties in the playoffs. Like, we had that big problem where, like, they weren't getting a power play for a long time in the playoffs. But in terms of the penalties themselves, there were a couple of boneheaded plays, but overall, I don't think they took as many penalties as, say, a team like over the stretch of 28 games, Boston.
Right. No, I think you're right. And I honestly, I don't even remember this being a major problem in the last couple of years, although I think we're still usually a pretty high penalized team. But it's definitely an issue right now. Personally, I'd like to see John Cooper, maybe for the next guy that makes a really stupid play and gets called for a penalty, just bench him. Bench him for even for 5, 6 minutes or whatever, and send a message to the rest of the team like, all right, I'm not messing around. He did this with Nikita Kucherov one time. It wasn't for penalties, but it was for something else. But the point was, he didn't care that it was his best player on the ice. He benched him and sent a message to the team. Kucherov didn't mess up after that. So I think it's gotten to the point where he's got to go and just send a message to the team. But, you know, it, very luckily, this is the only problem for the Lightning right now. So this is easily fixable as well. If the Lightning can get this fixed, they'll be right back on track, because despite the negatives in this game, there were some really good positives from this as well. It wasn't like they didn't play for a complete 60 minutes. There were some bright spots from this team. So, which I think is what makes it more frustrating. It's just that one thing that's really holding back the Lightning right now. So I really hope not just John Cooper, but the entire coaching staff can really get this team disciplined and fix this penalty problem, because if this continues, it's going to cost them some major games, especially come playoff time if it's still happening, and could ultimately end their season. I don't know how that all plays out in the future, but it's an issue right now, no question.
Yeah, and we do want to get to the positives. We don't want to ramble on too much. One of the other negatives I had, before we get to the positives, Jake, you and I agree on this. I think the Andres Borgman experience is sort of over. Like I I really liked him when he came into the lineup the first couple of games. He has not impressed over the last couple of games. He's taking penalties, he's missing assignments. It's just somebody that when McDonough and Chernak are back, I don't think you see Andres Borgman in the lineup probably at all for the rest of the season if the lineup remains healthy. And, if a left handed guy gets hurt, bring him in as a sixth guy, staple him next to Mikhail Sergachev on the right side, let Sergachev do all the work. So that's essentially what you have to do.
Yeah, I think once those guys come back in Eric Chernak and McDonough, that Boardman will be out. If anybody's going to pop in there, it's going to be someone like Luke Shen. I doubt we'll see him. And he has a couple of bright spots, but it just seems like he's making a lot of silly mistakes. And it's just not working out well for the Lightning, which is unfortunate, but that's just the reality that we're in. And maybe the Lightning make another trade for a depth defenseman and move on from Borgman because he's a minor contract and that's something that could be pulled off. Who knows? Nobody knows what JBB is going to do. Although I really do expect no trades to be made. That's another story for another time. Michael, I do want to get into one positive. I know you want to talk about this. We need to talk about that fourth line. And we're going to get into this a little bit later again when we get to our fan questions. So I'll speak briefly on it. But that fourth line is just absolutely stellar. If Ross Colton hasn't solidified his spot in the fourth line by now permanently, I don't know what else he has to do because when he's up there with that fourth line is flying on all cylinders with him and Matthew Joseph and Pat Maroon. I mean, it is just absolutely fantastic. They were great tonight again. I love that fourth line.
Well, you mentioned Ross Colton really fitting into that fourth line. I don't know if you noticed this early in the game. He was getting shifts on the third line. He was between Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow, and he looked great. Like he is someone that I think when Mitchell Stevens comes back, because he is at this point day to day, you could put Colton at 3C and you could put Stevens at 4C because it sounds like Stevens is going to get his spot back, which on ultimately, like he didn't lose it because of poor play. He lost it because of a dirty injury. So you sort of have to give it back. You're obligated. But I do think it's going to create really nice roster battle between the two of them to see who could possibly stay in that 4C role for now. And then next season, you get Ross Colton as the 3C, Mitchell Stevens as the 4C, which, that would be just incredible. And you get other people like ABB. I'm getting ahead of myself, but there's so much depth in the Lightning's forward system. It's so good. And Ross Colton has done a phenomenal job. Matthew Joseph, 9 goals already. Like we talked about a guy last season who he had 7 goals overall, but he really was not using his speed very well in terms of trying to make plays. He was just using it to try to beat other guys. He has turned in a performance that I didn't even expect this season. I expected a bounce back performance. And then Pat Maroon's that guy always that you sort of need. He did have a lazy back check on that Paquette goal, but we will forgive him because he did play very well otherwise tonight.
Yeah, no question about it. And he's a good leader in the locker room as well. He's one often speaking up after these losses and saying something about it. I'm sure he's saying a lot in the locker room as well. So he's a really, really good guy to have. Michael, how many other teams can talk about that they have a guy competing for the fourth line over the third line? That's how good our depth is, that we're wanting guys to play on the fourth line. But a great problem to have for the Lightning. Fourth line definitely firing on all cylinders right now. And hopefully that will only continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a good problem to have. We talk all the time about, oh, we're disappointed that Radish couldn't get in, or that ABB couldn't get in, or that Colton couldn't get in. It's a good problem to have that you have so many good players that some of them have to sit out once in a while. So I'm not too upset when these guys sit out. If they've been playing well, you want to keep them in the lineup. But other people deserve their opportunities as well. I'd love to see Taylor Radish get into a game at some point. I guess the question with that would be, who do you take out? Because nobody on the wing side is really performing all that poorly aside from probably Blake Coleman, but you have to put Blake Coleman in the lineup because he's such a great penalty killer. So it's a good problem to have. I'd like to see other people get into the lineup as well, like Mitchell Stevens when he comes back, like Taylor Radish, Jamel Smith, who recently got called back up from the crunch to the taxi squad. Love to have those guys back in the lineup, but you just don't know what the lineup's going to be every single night. And that's a good thing.
No question about it. It'll be exciting to see what John Cooper does here in the future, and if Jamel Smith gets another crack at the lineup soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got to move on to other stuff. We can't just keep raving about the fourth line. Someone that I thought had a great game, and I might be in the minority, as I am with a lot of things that I say on this channel, but we talk about someone on the right side that really needed to step up with the absence of Eric Chernak and lesser so, but the absence of Ryan McDonough as well. You've got two guys in there in uh, Cal Foot and Andreas Borgman, who have not played a lot in the Lightning system. And you've got Luke Shen, who is on the slower end of things in terms of his foot speed and sometimes messing up in terms of his assignments. Jan Ruda had a great game today, was with Victor Hedman for the majority of it. I know that makes some people, shudder in fear that there's a Hedman Ruda pairing still, but he was great. Like there were so many opportunities for the Hurricanes where I guess, worried that Vasilevsky would have to make every single save, and Ruda sacrificed the body. He made sure that Vasilevsky didn't have to have that much trouble when he was on the ice with whoever he was on with for the forward side of things. Just a solid performance overall by Ruda, who I know a lot of people have been hating on for this season, but he's been pretty decent overall.
I think he's had a really solid season, just in general. I think Ruda's been great. He struggled in a couple games. I can't remember if it was right before his injury or right after his injury. Actually, I think it was. But for the most part, Ruda's played really well. He's fitting really well with his team. I really like the direction he's moving. He's he's not meant to be a Victor Hedman, Mikhail Sergachev, Ryan McDonough type of guy. He's on the bottom half of the defensemen when you kind of if you rank them by talent or however you want to rank them. But he does his job. I think he does a really good job of it. He gets some good offensive opportunities as well. He's always involved on a lot of the Lightning goals, like getting the puck in front of the net and letting a guy tip it in. So Ruda has been great, and hopefully that can continue even once McDonough and Chernak are able to come back. So shout out to Ruda. He was fantastic. Last thing I'll say just overall about this game before we get to the fan questions, Michael, because I don't want to keep people waiting too long. But the Lightning played a solid first period. They were up 2-0 at the end of one. It was a great period. You're thinking, wow, where did this team come from? This is great. I thought this would be a lot closer game. And then they had a really bad second. They had a really big hiccup, to put it lightly, and made a lot of mistakes. And they Hurricanes came back and tied in the second. And then, I said in that second period, Michael, I said, don't panic. This team likes to do this for some reason and give us all of a heart attack, and they'll come back in the third. And the first minute of that third period was great. They came back in that third period. They tied the game and had a really good momentum going. And then they took more penalties and completely killed their momentum, made some more mental mistakes, ended up losing this game. So even though this was such a frustrating loss because of the penalties that they were taking and some of the missed calls, which again, you can't blame the referees for everything. I know it's frustrating, but there was a lot of positive from this game, because if you look at the first period, if they can replicate that throughout the whole game, they're going to beat teams like Carolina. The Lightning just tend to beat themselves when they lose some of these games, and that doesn't happen often.
Yeah, I think it really had to do with the fatigue. We talked about 8 games in 13 days. That's just not sustainable. I really think that they bungled the scheduling this year. overall. And I'm not just saying that as a Lightning fan. A lot of teams around the league will say, we need more rest and we're just not getting it. But these 2 days are going to help them out before they face Columbus. And I guess the good thing about Columbus is, they'll make you work hard, but they're not going to come at you with blazing speed. So, in terms of your energy level, it should be high, and you might get uh, a bit of you might get a bit of exhaustion by getting outworked possibly by them because they are probably the hardest working team in the league. But y- in terms of like exhaustion setting in by like the second period, like it did tonight, there's no way. Like I don't think it's gonna happen.
And credit to Carolina, they did a great job of making adjustments in after that first period and really pushing the Lightning. And even after Lightning tied the game, they took advantage of the Lightning's silly penalties and were able to win this game. So full credit to Carolina, who even John Cooper said is probably, like you said, the best team in the league or in the division other than the Tampa Bay Lightning. But Michael, we got some fan questions both on Twitter and Facebook. Let's get into those. We always love to hear from you guys. Any and all questions are always appreciated. We're going to answer them right now. So make sure you follow us on Twitter at Bay_Bolt. So when we post after the game, you can get your own fan questions in here so we can talk about them in the post game show.
Yeah, absolutely. And this first question coming from Facebook, something very new that we're trying on this channel for our post game questions, and it comes to us from Ellen Murphy. Apologize if I mispronounced that first name. She said, "Why so many penalties? It seems like they need to keep their emotions in check. Just read an article that the Lightning are the most penalized team in the league. What's that all about?" Jake, your thoughts?
I don't know what it's all about. We're asking the same thing. We're right there with you. But you know, she said in there, they need to keep their emotions in check. Yes, I think that's a big part of it. We kind of talked about earlier in this recap that they're getting frustrated and they're letting the Hurricanes and other teams get under their skin. Then they start making silly mistakes. That's one part of it, that they're taking so many penalties. That is true. And then also, I think that they start to fall behind, and then they, like the Boardman example. He went in, tried to make it 2 minutes of a play, and ended up getting caught behind and made a tripping call. Now, there is some of it, like maybe 10%, where they are just getting screwed on the calls, and the calls are just not great. For example, the Palat slashing call. Carolina, I can't remember who it was, kind of just dropped his stick. It was
Aho.
kind of a veteran move there to draw a penalty. Not much you can do about that. But the other 80%, it's emotions. It's just making silly mental mistakes like line changes. That's been a big issue, which we even get into in this recap for the Lightning as of late. But it's silly mental mistakes, but these can be fixed. And that's what we're harping on so much here.
Yeah, exactly. This is something that can be fixed. This is not a problem where you throw your hands up in the air and say there's nothing that we can do. But it just seems like over the last couple seasons, this hasn't been a problem that's been fixed. Hopefully, they can minimize the issue before something really bad happens and they really wear out one of their penalty killers or something like that. We got a couple other of fan questions on Twitter. The first one's from C.Goins3. Why do they call all the penalties in a row? I presume that is on the Lightning, and I'll answer this one. They're taking all the penalties. Like, I understand that there were missed calls against the Hurricanes, but the Lightning did shoot themselves in the foot by taking, I believe it was 3 or 4 consecutive penalties in a row. You just can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's again, you mentioned it, that they can't control what the referees call on the other team. But if they give the referees an opportunity to call a penalty on themselves, that's their own fault. And that's why you see those penalties in a row like that, because the Lightning are making silly, obvious mental mistakes that the referees can easily call. So, I know it kind of looks like the NHL maybe is trying to give Carolina an advantage. They're not. That's not what it is. These things happen. It's the Lightning making mistakes and giving the referees the opportunity to call those penalties.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that I think a lot of people are thinking the same as us. They are unfortunately giving the referees something to look after. And we've seen the referees sort of be in hot water recently where, they are looking for stuff to call. But when you make it easy on them, it's just the referees have to call it. But ending our fan question segment on a positive question, this one coming from Gage Ricker. Jake, you might know that guy. Why is our fourth line able to get consistent pressure on what seems like every shift?
I do know that guy, and I may sound biased, but that is a great question from Gage. So thank you, Gage, for sending in a question of your own there. And I think the reason they're able to get so much pressure on every shift is their chemistry. I just think that Ross Colton, Matthew Joseph, and Patrick Maroon, they all have different skill sets, right? Ross Colton, really good in the faceoff circle. Matthew Joseph has a lot of speed. Pat Maroon, smart veteran leader, has got that grit. He can throw the body if he needs to. All three of those things just happen to mesh really well. These guys have good chemistry and they're able to create good plays and get some carry. A lot of times we'll see Maroon maybe win a puck battle in the corner, get the puck up to Matthew Joseph. Matthew Joseph's able to use his speed, get down the ice. He knows Ross Colton. He played with them down in Syracuse. He's able to make a smart pass, put the puck where he knows Colton is going to be. Colton's able to grab that puck and put the puck in the back of the net, something like that. And it can go either way there. So I think just their chemistry is so good, and why we've seen Ross Colton succeed so much on that fourth line. And it's really paid off in spades for the Lightning. And that's why they're able to pressure out there every single night. And I can only hope that continues because, like we mentioned before, I love to see it.
Yeah, one other thing that I'll throw in there is that not necessarily in terms of Pat Maroon, he's been around a long time. Matthew Joseph has been around a couple of seasons. Ross Colton is new. Like teams don't know what they're expecting from Ross
It's a
Colton.
great point.
And so when you put Ross Colton next to a bruiser in Pat Maroon and a speedster in Matthew Joseph, you're creating different dynamics, like you said earlier in your piece. And Ross Colton brings sort of the best of both worlds. He can finish, he can skate, he can lay the body, he can do everything you want out of a third line, fourth line guy. And so when you bring him into the lineup, he might not win as many faceoffs as someone like Mitchell Stevens. He might not be as defensively sound as Mitchell Stevens. But what you're getting is someone that is willing to drive the play forward in ways that people just aren't expecting on other teams. So, I love Mitchell Stevens in terms of what he can bring to the Lightning.
You like
I'm the
Mitchell
conductor.
Stevens? I didn't.
I'm
I didn't
con-
know that.
I'm the conductor of the hype train. But I will admit that Ross Colton brings an edge to the fourth line that Mitchell Stevens just can't because he's not offensively savvy like Colton is. So when you have a new guy like Colton that other people have not done their scouting on, that brings a whole another dynamic into the third versus fourth lines that teams could put out there, the fourth versus fourth lines, and potentially if the first line of the other team is out there against that line, they might win some of those battles too.
Absolutely, no question about it. That's Thank you everybody for your fan questions. They were awesome. Please continue to send those in. We love talking about those. I think it makes this show a lot more fun and entertaining for you guys. So don't forget, send in your questions and let us know in the comments down below in this one what your thoughts are on this game. Always love to have a conversation even after we record the shows as well.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for watching this edition of Quick Strikes. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below. Let us know what you thought about this game, what you liked, what you didn't like. Talk about the penalties, but please not too much. We don't want to sound like a broken record. Also, make sure to ring that bell for notifications to make sure you get all of our amazing content. We have a new video coming out tomorrow, which has our top five, Jake and I, top five Lightning players of all time. Also, make sure to follow us on social media Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff at Bay_Bolts for all your news notes and game recaps. We do the game recaps live on Twitter. So come hang out with us, ask us questions for these videos as well. But guys, that is going to do it for us on this edition of Quick Strike. Thank you so much for watching. For Jake Ricker, I'm Mike Wax. And remember, your Tampa Bay Lightning are still defending Stanley Cup champions.
Go Bolts.